car here. He called me because he needed it wired up. It's got a whole Harley Dominator system, EFI. Nitrous, dry nitrous. So it was pretty, I don't want to say basic, but we wanted to keep everything pretty simple for him. With the option to add stuff later on, you know, we talked about just getting everything to run the engine. You know, basic stuff, drive shaft sensor, all your engine sensors. But like I said, the room to grow and add things later on, any shock sensors, G meter, transmission pressure sensors, all that stuff is kind of extra. It's not necessarily a needed thing to run the car, but it is data you might want to see at some point. But you also, I don't like overloading people with data when they're first kind of getting into some stuff here, because it gets confusing, it gets overwhelming. So we'll just kind of start here. But this thing, it's cool. You got everything set up, individual coils, which basically what we did was we took all of the stuff that Tony brought, the engine harness, the coil harness, everything, and just kind of cut it up and modified it to look nice, fit a little bit better. Side of the car here, we got the coils. Everything coil side goes out and up through the inside of the fender wells here, along with the wideband, so that hides a lot of everything in the engine bay, and it keeps that wiring kind of separated from the rest of everything else, to hopefully combat any noise issues or things like that. A lot of this was real kind of well thought out to try and make sure that we didn't have any noise issues. We had, you know, good ground and power paths and everything like that. So we still do have to get the drive shaft sensor in, mount the bumpers up and get those lights in, a couple little things here and there, but that's the basics of it underneath here. We'll drop it down, take a look at some of the inside stuff, and it's basically we'll kind of go front to back. Like I said, all the headlight wiring goes through and out, so you don't see any of that in the engine bay. We want to keep things as clean as possible here. So really all we have going through is anything to run the engine, whether it's all of our main EFI sensors, injectors, and things like that. And then we also have our fan, water pump, nitrous side of wiring going through here also. I did this, kind of split everything. What we did, we got, well, first off, I'll go over these. We got the bulkhead connector kit with the plate from Maven Performance. This, if you watch their video, there's a reason I grabbed that, because it's machined out so that the bulkhead connectors actually fit into the plate. They kind of lock in. I've used them in the past where they just, you know, put them through the firewall, screw them on, everything's good. But the problem is it makes it harder to service, makes it hard because sometimes you don't have it tight enough when you loosen these up to take them off. It'll spin the whole thing. This is a lot nicer way to go, so I'm happy we went with that. Turned out great. Brian at Racewire Solutions got us some cool things, as you see throughout. We got firewall pass-throughs there that make everything real nice and clean, so that turned out good. Regarding the wiring, we've got two different plugs here. So we've got this one here, which is going to be what I call all of our high current stuff, all of our nitrous solenoid, purge solenoid, water pump fan, all that goes through here along this side of the engine. That's higher current pulsing stuff, so I try to keep it as separate as possible. This loom here is everything that runs the engine. Like I said, injectors, all the sensors that we need, and your crank cam, things like that. So they come up and then they split off, and like I said, all the high current stuff kind of comes through here, stays a bit separate from everything else. These along here are our crank and cam sensor wires. They come down along with the oil pressure sensor. Like I said, and everything for the crank and cam is shielded wires, so that turned out pretty good. Everything should be nice and happy. We go inside the car. Car came in, had the Dominator mounted already up here, which was really nice. Anytime the components are mounted and it comes in, it does save time. Mounting the components, laying everything out, that's probably the most amount of time you're going to have when you wire a car. It's easy to string wires through stuff and just connect them up, but thinking it out kind of methodically to know, all right, I need to make this go here, I need to make this go there, that takes more time than anything. You know, a lot of these cars, you're going to spend 20 hours thinking on something just to do 5 hours worth of work, and that's with anything you do, whether it's the wiring. You want to lay everything out so that you're ready for the next step. Otherwise, you can get yourself into a pickle. Now you got to figure out how you're going to do something else. But basically, like I said, this was all mounted up, so that turned out great. kind of ran everything. This car, we did the wiring in kind of like stages. The first thing we did was we built the whole chassis harness. So everything that runs the lights, anything that has to do with the chassis is one separate harness. We wired that in, laid it all out, put it in, everything's good. And then what we did was we built kind of sub-harnesses from there. The EFI has its own harness. Then we took, with certain plugs on the ECU, we wired like the drive shaft and the second wideband all go on their own harness. And then we also have it set up so that if we do want to add more sensors and stuff, we can build a new harness, kind of lay it all together. I wanted to make sure that we could remove every single piece of wiring on this car without having to cut any wires. I can't stand that. When you have to take stuff apart, you got to cut it and then reconnect it. So everything can get removed. If you ever have to service a car, update the chassis, whatever you got to do, you can take every stitch of wire out, put it back in. And then what I also do regarding that is everything gets labeled with heat shrink so that if you do take it out, you shouldn't get confused on where things go when they go back together. And that's all done over here. If you get up close, you can see how everything's labeled and everything's done there. Shooting over there, what you can see is that little bracket. That's a really cool deal. I hold the connectors. It's from Race Wire Solutions. There's a couple other people that make ones too. I like this setup, so I grabbed it from Brian, and it makes everything so much nicer. I mean, we used to have to just tie things up, and you got cords everywhere, and it looks like hell, but it's just kind of a necessity. You have to have it. So there's that. Then coming back over here, the powers and grounds all come up here. Now, everything here, you can see there's quite a few ground wires there. Every ground on the car goes to that central point, and then goes right back to the battery with the big battery cable. So if that's one of two things, it's gonna help out with your ground path going straight back to the battery. It's gonna make things easy to diagnose. So if you have to get into something, you go, man, it seems like there's a ground issue, something, whatever. It's all going to be right there. That's going to be your whole ground, except for a couple ones in the back that go directly to the battery. But that's just the way I've always done it, and it really has helped out because I don't like to rely on the chassis grounding everything. There's a lot of resistance throughout the chassis, and it just isn't going to be the best way to do it. So, does it work? Yeah, sometimes. No, not always. But to me, that's the best way to do that. So. Up on top here, what I wanted to do, you can kind of see it through the top. Like I said, I wanted everything to be serviceable so we can take it apart. So we used a lot of the Deutsch connectors, and I'll go through that in another video, the different kind of connectors. What we did is we took the dash here, where we're using the power and ground from outputs from the ECU. That was per recommendation of a good friend of mine, Greg Powery, he's a really good Holley guy, so he's been helping me out with it. It's every system has kind of their own quirk, and Greg's been my go-to guy for that, so he's been helping me kind of determine. He's seen a lot more than I have regarding the Holley stuff, so it's been awesome. And then going through here, like I said, these harnesses all plug into each other, so you know what's what. Everything's labeled. This is our ECU trans brake plug, so this is where our ECU gets its trans brake signal from with the protection module and all that. This is a nitrous plug, so we know our activation and our trigger wire for the nitrous to run the progressive, so hopefully makes everything nice and laid out to service it if you do have to. So all the wires run up kind of along this side, right along the tubs there, and then come on into the back. What we did, and I'll go through some of that in the wiring video, but all these Deutsch plugs, I try and lay everything out so that we can mount things nicely, and they do have these little holder clips for these plugs. So wherever you have a Deutsch plug, you can put a holder clip in there, and it makes it nice. You don't have to have zip ties all over the place. However, you got to tie some stuff up once in a while. This is just simple. Our fuel pump relay we mounted to the bracket. It was a good place to mount it, I thought, because it fit really nice. Everything looked good. And then we got our battery charge cables and our whole rear light harness. So that's pretty much most of it. We still got to wrap up the drive shaft sensor. That's going to go down through the floor. It's turning out really good. We got a few more things to do, but we're hoping that Tony's excited and get this thing on the racetrack and have some fun. So see what happens. It might be fast.